Do people still have employment opportunities in a world increasingly focused on AI? And if so, where? And what competitive advantage do they have? Turns out there are still big opportunities for people in the workplace. The key is to understand what value humans can offer that technology can't, and how smart companies will see the strategic advantage of balancing people with AI. I'm Jane Singer, and welcome back to A Seat at the Table, where we sit down with industry leaders, innovators, and visionaries to get insights into how to position our companies for growth. To find out more about where humans have an advantage in an increasingly tech-driven world, I reached out to Ron Thurston, retail consultant and best-selling author. In his new book, Human Pride, Ron talks about the critical role people play in the retail sector, from entry-level roles all the way to C-suite leadership. In this podcast, Ron is going to share retail-proven insights on the importance of human connection in driving that all-important customer retention, why retailers need to identify and optimize each employee's strengths in order to reduce staff turnover, how non-linear career paths can be strategic for growth in today's retail landscape, and why people of all ages might want to consider the incredible opportunities in a retail career. Before we get started, if you're looking for a concise yet comprehensive view of the global apparel industry from factory to selling floor, then take a look at Inside Fashion. From identifying hidden growth markets to snapshots of key sourcing countries and brand analysis, Inside Fashion is packed with practical and actionable insights that can help brands and suppliers grow their business. You can find out more at InsideFashionLive.net. I'll also leave a link in the description and in the show notes. Now let's sit down with Ron and find out why AI might not actually take your job, at least not if you work in retail. Ron, thank you so much for being back here with us. Wow, it just seems like every time I take a look at what you're doing, there's something new and exciting, and now you have another book. So fantastic. Yeah, tell us a little bit about this book. What motivated you to write this book?
Sure. Thanks, Jane. Thanks for having me back on the show. And you've been such an incredible support for me all these years. So when we first spoke in 2020 with Retail Pride, and Retail Pride was a moment in time that I felt needed to be said about celebrating the people who work on the front lines of retail, which is millions of people. We know the statistics, 1 out of 4 people in the US alone work in this industry. And
wow.
I felt the need after 35 plus years working, leading the field, running stores, growing up in stores, that a message needed to be said about celebrating them and celebrating their accidental career in many cases. And so that turned into what I would consider a movement in many ways of recognizing the importance of the front line. And so that includes technology support. It includes developing and training teams. It includes investing in careers in the field. And it felt as though I was able to shift the conversation from the C-suite to the store, and was then able to start to speak at some of the big conferences like NRF and Shop Talk, and travel around the country for more than a year, speaking to retailers and hearing their stories, speaking to leaders and founders and CEOs, and doing a podcast called Retail in America, and tell the stories of the importance of the front line. And here we are 5 years later from that, nearly 4+ years. And the conversation today is slightly different because we are at a time when AI has started to dominate the conversation. And AI has become this massive influence in what we perceive as career growth, as job search, as customer engagement. And so this is not just about retail for me anymore. This is a much larger conversation about how we show up as our most human optimized self, because the thing that we control most is how we engage with work, how we engage with each other, how we celebrate, kind of recognize success in a different way. And the importance of standing firm in human pride and optimizing our own human potential is where I wanted to shift the conversation. And this certainly all includes retail, but now it includes other industries that are in many ways struggling with how to manage a multi-generational workforce, with a shift in resources that are changing, a shift in job search strategies. All of it is an evolution, and I wanted to lend my voice to that conversation.
That's such an important topic, Ron, and it's very timely because obviously AI has really taken everybody's attention by storm, and industries are wondering how to use it, what they should be doing around it, what it might not be able to do. But I think the really big issue, as you're pointing out, is where do people fit into the equation? And there's a lot of conversation around that. Everybody has different objectives that they're trying to optimize for. In many cases, it's let's get rid of as many people as we can. In other cases, some people are wise and realize you need a combination of both, but they're not really sure. So I think this is so important. And I think there is really, in my opinion, nobody better to address this than you. Because, I think that you understand the human factor in a way that many big companies don't look at. Because when you look at it on an Excel sheet, it just looks like an expense. And until you've been on the floor, so to speak, and also the customer side, but whoever factors that into the equation, right? Unfortunately,
they say that they do. I'm not always confident that that happens.
Yeah, I know, right? Let's just, dare to dream. But I think that someone like yourself, we need to talk about how all of this is going to work together and come up with a plan that suits everybody and that ends up, creating growth for people, but growth for industry. You have to have both working together.
You do. And thank you for saying that, because I felt like working in retail for all of my career was about that. It's about human connection and about brand and about building brands and loyalty and developing careers around people who may not have a specific education for a linear path of a career. Most people, don't say that they chose to work in stores, yet when they do, they fall in love with it. And then they want a longer career path. And sometimes you want to go and have a career in marketing, buying, planning, finance. There are so many different options, but that's not always available to people in the field. And so what I felt like, you're right, I've been very close to the human experience in the workforce, because the other piece that's, I think, so unique about retail is that it moves so fast, and that feedback is important in the moment. It's not an annual review process. Like you every day the store opens. Okay, what did we do well yesterday? What do we need to change? What's not? So it's this constant kind of resource of feedback all the time. You get feedback from your customers walking in. You understand, conversion on that traffic. Well, what's working? Why didn't they buy? You're watching this all live. And you're right. That's very different than looking at Excel and saying, well, why is the conversion low, Ron? Well, let me tell you why, because it was in the store all day and this is what happened. And so when you put that mindset toward any other industry of we need to make faster decisions, we need to be closer to our teams, we need to understand the customer feedback more quickly, we need to not rely just on technology, but actually have those conversations, that you will make smarter, I think, more intentional thought that is also faster. Because that's the reality of today, Jane, is that the speed of technological change requires us to actually be better decision makers and smarter. Financially, we need to be better at this, that you can make smart financial decisions faster than you've ever needed to before. And the risk is higher today. And so it's highly complex. I'm not saying that this is an easy answer of talk to your team. I'm saying, but the way that businesses have operated for the last couple of decades, it doesn't work. And the way that we've led people in the last couple of decades doesn't work at scale in a multi-generational world. And we have to change and think, I won't say change, think differently about all of these things.
We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll be right back.
If you're a pet owner who wants real talk on training, behavior, and everyday life with animals, check out the Fresh Patch Podcast. Hosted by Drew and Gabe, we cover the wins, the challenges, and everything in between. So wherever you listen, search the Fresh Patch Podcast, where good pets get it.
You're so right. And, it's unfortunate that nobody is really talking about it, or talking about it publicly, I should say. People, of course, are talking about these things, but no one has really given a voice to it like you have. And yet it's 100% true. And you see that all the time when you're experiencing retail yourself, right? And you think to yourself, wow, it really is meaningful when I go into a store and the cashier is friendly. And I don't know why, but it makes you like the whole store better. And it's not that I'm looking to have a long-term friendship with the person who's ringing up a product for me in Dwayne Reed, for example,
Right.
But it makes a difference. And I think retailers don't factor that in, how much of their selling proposition has to do with their frontline staff, because so many people feel lonely, feel isolated, feel frustrated. For some people, the only positive human contact they may get is walking into a store and having someone actually ask them, how are they, and respond in a friendly way, or go to the post office and someone smiles at them, or, it's sad to say, but we are very disconnected in a very hyper-connected world, right, as we are with technology. People feel very,
really
very
true.
isolated. Yeah.
It's really true. And the great part is that retail is open to all.
Right.
And so it costs nothing. So you're right, where we think about the opportunities we have of how we engage, this is actually the space that doesn't require a purchase to engage. It's different than sitting down in a restaurant or going to a coffee shop. And while that could happen, you can go to any mall in the world today and spend 4 hours and walk around and talk to people. And which is what I love to do. But for some, it's not. It's the more welcoming we are as a retail industry, the more influence I think we have on change. And the idea here of optimizing your human potential, when I say that to people, the question, well, what does that mean? It means discover what you're really good at. If you're great at connecting with strangers and starting conversations, and that's who you are, then celebrate that. And that you are then the best person to put in the front of the store and talk to everyone that comes in. And I think we have often said you need to have multiple skills and be able to do everything in a retail environment or everything in a restaurant. And my point of view has really shifted to celebrate what people are really good at and let them do that, because the part of the challenge, I believe, of high turnover in our industry is that we try to force people to do things that they're not good at. And so people that are afraid of all those strangers walking in and hide in the corner, I know these people because I've hired them, want to work in the stockroom. And yet we say, we really need to learn how to sell. They're terrified. And so if we say, you know what, you're phenomenal at organizing about process, or maybe ship from store, or all the things that make a good retail business operate, let them do that. And then find people who are really good with the customer, find people who are efficient at the register. They don't have to learn how to do everything. And that's optimizing potential instead, if we continue to ask them to do things that they don't enjoy, they're going to leave and go somewhere else to do what they love or find another brand. And so we almost self-inflicted high turnover rates of things that we actually control. We can fix this. And turnover is the number one challenge I hear from every C-suite leader in the industry. I say, well, tell me what your biggest challenge is. We can't find people that want to work for us, or we can't keep our people. They won't stay. And no C-suite executive wants to hear me say, well, you can fix that. That's your fault. It's not the employee's fault. No one wants to hear that hard truth, but it's true. But it's true. And they don't know it because they don't always spend a lot of time in stores or don't have a feedback loop to hear what's really going on. And so much of, I believe, the challenges that exist in our industry are very solvable. They're not mountains that can't be climbed. Like, we can fix this, but it's very human, and it's very messy, and it's very emotional in many ways to do this really well, but we need to do it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And, I think that, like you're saying, in a sense, the people at the top of the decision-making chain, C-suite, or however you want to refer to it, have become a bit siloed in a sense. And it's more of using, whatever tools they can use to analyze and to look at things from that point of view, which is important. The numbers are important. We can't deny that. But you're right. Nobody's on the selling floor like in the old days. So people don't have that closeness with the staff and the merchandise. So every staff member, every piece of merchandise is just a number, right, on some kind of a spreadsheet or other analytical tools. It's not that effective in many retail situations, like you're saying, as you would be understanding some of the less tangible reasons why products actually sell or why people like your store or don't like your store.
Right. It's true. And I would also then not put this kind of blame or the challenges squarely on the top. I have the opportunity to speak to a lot of students in some of the big universities or NRF foundation clubs. I get to be involved with 20 to 24-year-olds, and they have opportunities to learn about the industry too. And they all want to work in fashion or buying or design. There's this kind of the glamorous side of this industry. It seems very appealing. And yet, my answer is, if you want to work at this brand, choose your favorite brand, go work in the store.
Yes.
And they don't always choose that path. I said, because the job market is extraordinarily difficult. You have to find every single opportunity. Again, if I'm optimizing my own human potential as a candidate, what do I need to do? I need to study. Maybe I need to work for the brand in a different channel. Maybe it's stores because it's the easiest. In order to learn about that brand, I need to be able to meet as many people as I can that both work in the office and the field. Like, do your homework. And you have to find every way to discover and chart your own trajectory here. And I will say, I don't see that level of intensity in these kids, or kind of how to use LinkedIn, how to use your resources around you, what you can be studying or reading or speaking to or listening to. That's how you do the work. And so I think we actually have challenges on both sides of the table here. Yes. Seat at the table. Literally, we have challenges on both sides of the table that have work to do. But I love it, and it keeps me very energized.
Yeah, of course. And sometimes when there is work to be done, that's what energizes you. If everything's going well, there's nothing to work on. It becomes a bit stagnant. Now, talking about younger people getting into this, from your point of view, is it still a valid way to start out by trying to get a job in a store, working in a store, and then work your way up from being, on the selling floor to manager to on up through the chain? Or is nowadays that not really a viable, there's always the outliers, but, is that something people could look at and think that is really a viable trajectory?
I don't see it as a viable trajectory in a traditional, like, I'm going to choose this brand and be here for the next 10 years. I don't, that's a very uncommon path now. I started at the Gap and I spent 10 years there, from sales associate to, regional director. But that idea seems odd when you speak to students today. And so I think what they will do instead is have the same path, but along that path, they've worked for 3 or 4 different brands. So it's become not as frowned upon to say 2 years here or 3 years here. Every step with intention gets you to that same goal, but they're staying there with the hope of getting to that path is not the traditional way anymore. And on the flip side, people who may have spent too much time, I meet a lot of candidates or colleagues in a job search that were at the same brand for 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, and all of a sudden there's a reorganization that makes you a very difficult candidate to be placed. So I think there's actually many positive reasons. Again, you kind of talk about career strategy. Well, what is it that you want to do? But you don't need to know all the answers today. But what you do need is to pay attention to what's happening in the industry. And I share my own career trajectory often with students because, I sold, Gap, I sold baby clothes. I worked at the outlet division. And then at West Elm, I sold furniture. Running Apple stores, I'm selling technology. I sold the highest end of luxury at Saint Laurent. The multi-brand environments at Intermix. The only thing common between all of them is that I chose those brands at a time when they were at the peak of their relevance in their arc. And I said, I want to be there. So it matters less about what you're selling and more about what you're learning and how that adds to the value of your resume. And yes, some of that you make money choices. The strategy behind a career in this business is as important as kind of time spent, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because you're right. The thinking has changed from valuing someone who stayed with a company for a very long time to someone who has perhaps strategically job hopped, not always because they want to. Sometimes it's because they're forced to, but realistically, that used to be a negative. Whereas now, I think what you're saying is that has become more of an asset than a liability.
Yeah. And as long as you can tell your story. So the same, like part of what I write in this book is about identifying your own core values and then learn how to articulate that in a job interview, in a promotion conversation. If you can tell the story in a way that makes sense to whoever you need to tell it to, then your likelihood to achieve that goal is greater. That's again, no one can tell your story except you. And technology can't do that for you. Like you've got to practice. And I'll say to students are concerned about interviews that are AI based on interview one, and then it's Zoom, and then it's a phone call, and then it's an in-person interview. And I said, you have to be good at all of them. You don't have a choice. You have to be exceptional at every point of engagement here, and they require different skills. And so like that's the idea of how do you put strategy behind your job search and then tell your story behind it. You will be a much stronger candidate because of it, and people will gravitate to you when they think about promotions and all of it. There's a reason behind your decisions.
Wow, that's really, it's so daunting when you think about everything that you have to go through. And it looks to me like it would favor a certain kind of person, but it would work very much against another kind of person who may be a very good candidate, right? And a very solid person. Yet I wonder how some people would overcome being able to an AI interview, a Zoom interview. Okay, we're sort of used to that by now, but so much of it is really getting over those initial hurdles for somebody. Really, really challenging.
Really challenging. And in many cases, Jane, it's just practice. If you're uncomfortable, then, I do mock interviews with people, or like, let's actually use cue cards as if it were an AI interview. Like, here's the go. You're not like, nobody's here. Just talk. And you're right. It's for many people, it's very difficult, to showcase your personality when no one's engaging or shaking their head, or it's they are in many cases learned skills, but we're not in a job market, where you can pick and choose what you're going to be good at. You have to be good at all of it, or at least good maybe is overstating. You need to be comfortable enough to look like you're good at it too.
That's such a good point. I really like the way you framed that basically you don't have to be born good at it, but you do have to practice and develop those skills like you learn any other skill.
It's really true. It's the same of public speaking or anything else. They're learned skills. And
Yes.
you only get better with practice.
Absolutely. Now you talk about the fact that retail is really struggling to find people, right? I guess most of certainly the beginning levels and probably even in the middle level to fill many different positions. How do you see that as an opportunity for older people? I know that there's a lot of people who are older in their career. Some of them maybe want to be partially retired. Other people ended up getting laid off and hard to find another job, but don't want to be sitting around. Are there opportunities in retail, or does retail, like so many other industries, have sort of an age limit on it?
I think it can depend on the brand.
Okay.
So find the brands where you are their customer.
Okay.
Because
in
smart brands don't fill their stores with people who the customer can't connect with.
Right.
And so, I would say, as I was, heads of stores for several brands, like every store should reflect your community, and that includes age, that includes diversity in many ways. That should reflect the community. So I come in and I see myself, and I then immediately feel comfortable in the environment. And so brands that do that really well are brands that you think statistically are probably converting more customers that walk in, maybe have better loyalty, maybe have stronger average transactions. So there's a financial result that comes from these smart decisions. So find the brands that you love and shop at, and then maybe that's one where you want to work. There are many of those. As the world shifts and you think about what should the experience in my store be? How do we represent ourselves? And you want to represent yourself in a way that feels like you're connected to the community, but maybe most importantly, you're building retention. Because if a customer sees themselves in the building, their likelihood to come back is that much greater. I don't have statistics around that. I just know that from working in the industry. You feel like, oh, they get me. They understand me. They know my challenges. And if I'm 60, but if a 22-year-old is trying to help me find clothes, there may be a challenge there, like around personal style. And so there's a lot of reasons to think about how to celebrate that kind of multi-generational workforce that is so alive and well today.
We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll be right back.
We were hiring when we were making 50 to 100K monthly losses.
And why? Welcome to episode 1.
I can't think of a single founder who's been around for a decent amount of time in business who hasn't had their tunnel of year. This was that year. We're going to be okay, yeah, Sheree. Some are going to hear this and think, you TDP. But hear me out. You only have to do the math to understand that very soon we were $500,000 down.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And I suppose companies need to think a little bit more out of the box. And like you say, if you have a multi-generational selling floor, you're able to work it from multiple angles, right? The young person who wants another young person to advise them, the young person who feels judged by their peers and would prefer to have an older person that's sort of like mom advising them, right? The older person who wants someone young because they feel they'll get more fashionable. The older person who says, no, I want someone my age. So I guess there's multiple different ways, right, that you can play one thing off the other.
It's true. And from my experience, the stores that do that well are always more successful. The challenge in that scenario is that then the leader of that store has to learn how to manage different people of different generations. And so when you think about how people are trained, hired, trained, have career path conversations, all of that is different based on where you are in life.
Right.
So I do think we've had this very kind of cookie cutter, this is how we do it here at this company, should apply to all, doesn't work anymore. And
Right.
it's one of those that's, say, well, maybe training and onboarding for this group of people, or you ask, I think number one, don't make assumptions about this. So say, well, where do you think you will have the most success in your training here? And someone would say, you know what, I'm really good like watching videos. Well, great. I'm going to give you an iPad, put you in the stockroom. Someone else would say, really like a shadow buddy to spend my first 3 days working side by side with me. Great, Jane, I'm going to get you someone to do that for you. And the other may want to read. So I actually think we can't assume based on age how someone wants to learn. But great leaders, then that's part of the conversation of finding out what your team wants so that then they're successful, they stay with you longer, they engage with the customers better, they feel confident because they've had great training, but they had great training because you asked how they wanted to learn. And this is, again, when you think about optimizing the potential of your team, you do that by asking great questions. And then your job as a leader is to provide the solutions to make that happen. And I see that as an opportunity for many brands.
That's such a fantastic insight. And when you think about it, it's something you can do without having to request more budget, so to speak, right?
It's true.
Sometimes the best ideas don't necessarily require huge CapEx or changing everything the company does. It's just a little bit of like you're saying, a tweak and 10x the success of what you're doing.
It's really true. And it's not that hard to do.
Yeah. Like you say, it's just a matter of bringing that to someone's attention in leadership and saying, you might want to look at it from this point of view, or, have you thought about trying this way, with your people and understanding, as you're pointing out, the different personality types and matching the right training and the right job assignment with the right person so that you're maximizing the productivity and the happiness of the people on your team.
I would agree. And I think that concept applies in every industry, but it also applies in corporate environments.
Yes.
Traditional corporate, annual review or maybe quarterly check-in, annual review process doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah.
And financially, you may have an annual review process, but if someone wants 15 or 30 minutes of your time every week in the first 2 years of their career, it's your responsibility to give that to them. Don't say, oh no, we're going to wait for your quarterly check-in. Like, find out what your people need, find out what's going to provide the path to the greatest success, and then do that. And someone else may say, you know what? No, I'm good with my quarterly check-in. Like, if I have any questions, I'll let you know. Okay, great. It's like everyone needs something unique. And we think for many, many companies, because I hear it so often, they've had this process that they've always done, and that's just the way we do it here. And some people like it, some people don't, but we're okay with that. And then they're frustrated that people leave. They're frustrated that they do an employee engagement survey, that the results come back very poor. It just worked with a major brand doing an offsite for their executive team who received exactly this. They did a large employee engagement survey and the results were terrible.
Really?
And they wanted to get together as a leadership team, and I facilitated a weekend of working through this. Like, you have work to do as a leadership team because your people don't like working here. You need to have some like hard reality. And so part of that is also, how do you shift your own leadership style and goal? How do you think differently about maybe how the company operates, and kind of get out of some of the bounds and the things, the mindset of this is just how we've done it here.
Right.
Like that won't work. will not work for future workforces.
Yeah, that's so true, Ron. It's hard for people to break away from doing what they've always done. And oftentimes people in leadership are afraid to make changes because if it doesn't work, they'll be vilified. So they feel that even if they believe in it, the risk factor, very, very, very difficult for people to do that. But you're absolutely right. Sometimes you have to be willing to take a flyer on things and try to understand that what used to work isn't working anymore, particularly like you say, when you're getting very bad results from your engagement feedback.
Yes. And you can't blame the employee. Well,
right.
So that's the first response is, well, they're this and they're that, or, they're young. I'm like, no, like you have to self-reflect first. Part of human pride is every chapter has the self-reflection moment before of like, what do you want to learn here? What are some of the goals of you reading this chapter? Maybe it's about job search or about leadership. Like, well, where do you stand on this topic first? So self-reflect before you immediately assign blame about why the results are a certain way. And I think that's very true in job search. Candidates that are frustrated about why they're not getting interviews. When I speak often to them, I'll start asking those kinds of questions like, well, what have you done? What have you researched? What did you say? What questions did you ask? And what was your follow-up? I can immediately tell them why they didn't get the job. This is why they didn't hire you. And I think that you have to self-reflect first and don't blame the hiring manager. Think about yourself. Don't blame your team because your survey came back poor. What do you need to do differently? And that is same. You have to optimize yourself, optimize who you are. And that may mean changing the way you've done it.
Ron, in your book, you talk about the human potential framework. And I think that sounds really interesting. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, I'd love to. So the idea here of putting some context to what it means to optimize your human potential, but think about what is the framework of your greatest potential? Like, how do you do that? What is the path to get there? And so I wanted to put it into a kind of very simple 3-step process. So one around reveal. And when I talk about reveal, it is reveal your own, maybe hidden strengths, reveal the strengths that you know about, but it's also at the company level, reveal what are our greatest opportunities. In a world where technology continues to evolve and adoption becomes even greater, you have to reveal what are the opportunities to move a business forward, to move yourself forward. And so first it's recognize what we need to do. Like, let's uncover and reveal what do we need to do and what are our strengths. And the next would be like connecting then, maybe it's connect to new opportunities, connect then people that may have a different career path going forward, connect kind of the dots of your business to really like re-energize the company. And to maybe it's some of that, like I've been describing, doing things differently is connecting the dots in a different way, that the linear path didn't work. So we've revealed what we need to do differently, connected those dots, and maybe reconnected people into different jobs. Even same, like people who maybe have worked in marketing or copywriting or some things that can be done through technology today, they have other skills. So maybe their career path connects in a different way. And then from there, it's kind of transforming your business, transforming yourself and transforming your business of how you can think differently, how you can deliver different results, how your career can evolve. All of this is then about a transformation toward your greatest potential. And I'd love for people to just put themselves in that framework and say, well, where am I today? Have I really truly revealed what are my core values? What am I actually really good at? Where am I most successful? And then how do I connect that to a job opportunity? And that can really transform my life, my career. And at the very senior level, what are you hiding? What do you need to reveal or do differently? How do you connect that to your business results, which could potentially transform your business? And that it's a very simple 3-step idea, but if you dig deep into those 3 words, there's a lot of value here that anyone can apply.
I think that's really interesting. And I like the way you brought that up because it ties in with the fact that, let's be honest, you do have a lot of people who've been working in jobs that are going to go to AI. And you point out copywriting and things like that. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying in every case, but in a lot of cases, copywriting through AI is really, really impressive. Mm-hmm. So people who are in some of those jobs are facing redundancy at a certain point. And to be able to look at where you are, what you have, as you're pointing out, and see how do I parlay that into my next opportunity. I really love that. I think you've done a brilliant job with that because oftentimes people understand the concept, right? Well, you have to look at what you have and do something else, but people don't always know how to do it, right? They understand the concept, but the how is always difficult.
Mm-hmm. The how is difficult, and it's, like I mentioned earlier, I think the hardest part of it is the self-reflection, like the reality of maybe thinking differently about your career. And so you're right, there is currently going on job elimination, and there are, like, the future is scary in some cases. So you say, you know what, I thought that this was going to be the next 20 years. And it looks like it's not. And so what are my strengths? What am I best at? And how can I apply that? How can I optimize my own successes and opportunities here to apply that toward that next career that maybe is not one I even thought about. Maybe it's an industry that I didn't even consider. Maybe it's a side of the business. If you think about retail, maybe your goal was to always work in marketing, but in fact, I've seen this happen several times. You're in the field and you get to the office and you realize, yeah, now I have the job on the marketing team, but I don't get to speak to strangers every day. And I don't get to, like, have the fun that I used to have in the store. I've had people for years would try to get to corporate, and then they got to corporate and they wanted out.
Right.
It's not the same. And so we live in a time where this conversation needs to be more of a priority, I think, at every level, and to be knowledgeable about what's happening in the world and what's happening in the industry of choice, and how the customer, most importantly, is thinking differently about how they operate in retail, how they operate in the world, and what you can do differently. Same, when I talk about reveal, understand your customer. Reveal, like, what do they really want? How do you connect then your brand to that customer? And transformation happens when you've actually done that work. You've listened and learned and changed your business model to serve the customer that you've learned more about. Again, that sounds simple, but I don't think it's done at the level of detail in many cases that needs to be, or the work is done and the actions aren't taken. And I think that because it costs too much money. And so then big ideas just stop. And that has killed a lot of ideas and dreams. But so fine, the budget has changed, but the goal doesn't. And right. So how then we work differently in order to achieve the same goal is, don't just give up on this. We won't survive otherwise. So there's many ways you could apply this framework.
I think it's so interesting. And I think that, when I'm listening to what you're saying, on the one hand, you're right. A lot of companies will never make the change or will not do it with the detail that you're suggesting that they would need to do to get the results that actually would make it meaningful. But at the same time, it opens up a huge opportunity for those few companies, the fewer who are willing to do it, can suddenly, really jump ahead in the market where maybe in other areas they're struggling, but they're changing this aspect of the business that could perhaps really help them get a competitive advantage.
I think so too. Many brands are very top of mind today is acquisition and retention for customers. Yes. No matter what you sell, this is a conversation, and I'm about to go to a conference to speak of like 350 retail brands, all of their marketing teams. And the number one thing that's top on their list is acquisition and retention. Acquisition is very expensive. Facebook ads and all the marketing channels are very expensive. And if you don't have a store, your only channel is e-commerce, you are in a very difficult place. How do I acquire customers on a budget that's not growing? And the cost of advertising has gone up. So number one, how do I acquire? But maybe more importantly today, how do I retain? And so then that shifts immediately back to the store. Customers who shop in multiple channels are likely more loyal than those that don't. And so then we're back at the store, we're back at loyalty, we're back at people again. And say this whole conversation that you and I are having, Jane, is about customer loyalty and building your business at the core of like human potential. That's what this business is. And it's what every business is, hotel businesses and food and beverage businesses and retail and anything where you're engaging with the customer, airlines. Think of all the drama that has gone on in airline industry. It's about service.
Right.
And it's the biggest kind of variable in all of this, of the challenges ahead, is we have to treat people differently and better at the employee level, or these challenges are only going to get worse.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, Ron, you bring so much to the table, so many great insights, things that are interesting, but also actionable and practical, which I like, because a lot of people have big ideas, but they're big ideas, you know what I mean? Right. And you sort of think about, but how do you really execute on that in like the real world? But I think what you bring are things that people could actually start doing literally today, which don't involve a lot of expense. They just involve, a mindset change, a willingness to change.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, Jane. And you're right. That can sometimes be the biggest obstacle.
True.
Just throw more money at it. It's actually change how you think. And at the senior level, senior leadership level, that can be hard, but that work needs to be done. And I love to do that with teams. I love to watch the kind of unraveling of old ideas and whiteboarding out the future. But it requires the minute you leave that conference room that you act differently, you lead differently, or you work on a team differently. And that's not natural for many people.
Yeah, exactly right. Change is very hard. It's easy to talk about, but all of us, right, in some aspect of our lives are trying to change something that just never seems to change. So yeah, it is difficult. But like you say, once you've identified it, and at least you understand what you are trying to change and where you are, where you want to be, and a series of action steps like what you lay out for your clients, I think that you now have a roadmap. And sometimes really that's what people need to get them to move forward. A lot of times I think, and myself too, right? It's not that I'm unwilling to do something different or to try something or to put in the effort, but you don't really know what the next thing is. You understand the concept, but you need to have someone tell you, do this next, right? Yeah. And this is how you do it, right? It almost seems like, pathetic, right? Someone needs to tell me that. But in different aspects of what we do, we need that. So I think a lot of people who work with you benefit tremendously from the fact that you can lay that out for them, like sort of process documentation. Do this, then do that. Check how that's working. Not working? Try this.
Thank you. Yeah, and it can be surprising then how simple it can be if you do that. Right. And I speak a lot about you don't have to all agree in this room, about the challenges you're having or the goals you want to achieve or how you operate, but you have to align on doing what you agree on in this room. You have to align. That's what you will do. And that is, for, again, senior leaders, agreeing and aligning an action to agree. We're revealing where our opportunities are. We all agree that these are the challenges. We've connected the dots, but transformation only happens if you are aligned and then act on what you do. Instead of leaving the room and Monday morning we're back and we're doing the same bad habits again. Transformation will never occur.
Yes.
You may have connected the dots, or you may have connected to see the opportunities, but transformation will never occur if there's no change. And that's a hard reality to understand of but we thought this was going to be easier, and it's not. You have to put in the work, and maybe it is someone following up all the time, or how is this doing? How did this process change in order for them to get to transformation?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Ron, really, thank you so much for all of your time. People, you must get this book. I'm going to put links to it in the show notes, in the description for the video. It's a must read, really. Anything that Ron has done is definitely worth listening to, reading, paying attention to. He brings so much to the table. So I would really encourage anyone to get your hands on that book now. Don't think about it, do it.
Thank you, Jay.